Ferret's Folly, by Stephen Lake. Two tiny heads peeked out of the grass near the shoreline of a large inland sea and cautiously searched the area for danger. After several moments they stood up to reveal the long, sleek bodies of two ferrets that were covered in soft, light brown fur with black and gray stripes that tossed about gently in the light afternoon breeze. "Do you see anything?" asked the smaller of the two ferrets. The larger one twitched his whiskers and sniffed the air. "I think it's safe," he said. The smaller one nodded, after which the two of them vanished into the grass once again as they scurried closer to the edge of the beach. Eventually the larger one stood up and surveyed the beach cautiously. "It should be safe to change now." "I don't think we were followed," he said. The smaller ferret took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and nodded twice. Soon after this her slender, furry body began to change and transform from a small ferret into that of a beautiful young girl of about 12 years old. Her fur was also quickly replaced by a gently flowing, forest-patterned, brown and green-colored blouse, and matching skirt that tossed about lightly in the breeze. This was accented by long, golden blonde locks that floated gently around her ears like thin, fluffy clouds. The other ferret soon transformed as well, changing quickly into a strapping young man of nearly equal age. He, in turn, wore a light green tunic and brown shorts that showed off his smooth, youthful, gently tanned skin. The two children then looked around briefly to ensure that they were the only ones there before giggling gleefully, knowing that they'd successfully escaped from the castle. "I wonder what poor Nanny is thinking right now. She must be going bonkers searching the entire castle for us," said the girl with a great big jolly smile. The boy rolled his eyes. "Nanny? She's the least of my worries. I always have to deal with Rotifer," he muttered in a disquieted, frustrated voice. The girl giggled in return at this. The boy then motioned towards the sea. "Come on, let's take the boat out onto the water and go sailing," he exclaimed. Upon hearing this, the young girl squealed with glee, and then followed him down to the beach. They soon came to a large row of shrubs where they paused briefly to, once again, ensure that nobody had followed them. Certain they were safe, and with a dash of flair, they grabbed the leaves of the shrubbery and pulled on them. The shrubs shuddered briefly, and then transformed into a thick, flowing, burlap cloak that fluttered to the ground to reveal a small wooden sailboat. The boy folded up the large burlap cloak and set it to the side before helping the young girl and removing a number of boxes from inside the boat, provisions that had been placed there in case they were ever needed. Once finished, they dragged the boat to the edge of the sea, and launched it into the water. They then raised the sail and hung on tight as the breeze playfully snatched the sail in its blustery grasp, quickly carrying the little boat far out into the water as it did. For several hours afterwards the two children sailed up and down the coastline, happily enjoying the warm, moist air around them as they basked in the brilliance of the midday sun. Later that afternoon, they set about catching a mess of fish, which they soon brought back to the shore. Once there they took the fish, and some of the provisions they'd taken from the boat, and fixed themselves a very hearty meal that they then consumed with great joy. After finishing, they happily laid themselves down on the warm sands of the beach and took a long, restful nap in the shade of a nearby tree. They eventually awoke several hours later just as the sun was drawing close to the distant horizon. This was also causing shadows to spread out everywhere and quickly blanket the land in darkness as the day rapidly drew to a close. "I think we should be getting back soon," said the boy sleepily. The young girl agreed and quickly set about helping her brother gather up everything they'd taken out of the sailboat, and place it back into it in a neat and orderly pile, just like it had been before. They then tossed the brown burlap cloak over the small boat and watched as the coarse brown material quickly changed into thick, lush bushes again, once more hiding their sailboat and its private stash. The girl then turned to the boy, gave him a great big bear hug, and said, "Edwin, thank you for such a wonderful afternoon. It wouldn't have been possible without you." The boy smiled and rubbed her hair playfully. "Hey, that's what brothers do best." "Ah, what a touching scene," said a man as he stepped out of the forest edge. The two children immediately snapped around, and looked at the man in surprise and fear. The man soon held out a large, rusty cutlass and pointed it towards the two children as he grinned at them with a mouth full of putrefied, rotting teeth. A beard hung from his chin in thick, oily dreadlocks that were filled with matted, mangy hair which reeked of ale and other, far more foul and disgusting things. Two other men soon stepped out of the woods behind him looking just as equally disheveled as he. However, one of them soon reached over and slapped the first man on the head. "You Neanderthal! We were supposed to surprise them," he said angrily. "What do you think I just did?" "Look at how surprised they are," said the first. The boy, seeing a momentary opening, grabbed the girl's hand and, with a gentle squeeze, quietly said, "Ferret. Now." The two immediately shape-shifted back into their previous ferret forms, and then raced off into the woods as the men argued among themselves. Suddenly the third man in their group realized that their prey was gone, and immediately punched the other two to get their attention. "You bloody idiots! They're getting away," he screamed. The other two men immediately stopped their arguing and turned to the third man in surprise. "What are you talking about?" cried the first in surprise and anger. "They just scampered away, you bloomin' git," shouted the third. "Why didn't you follow them?" protested the first man. "Because you idiots were too busy fighting." The first growled angrily, and then quickly transformed into a gray, mange-covered wolf. "Well then, we need go to find them, even if we have to tear this forest apart to do it," he screamed. The other two men soon transformed into large, mange-covered wolves as well, and quickly spread out into the woods in search of the two children. Their terrifying howls and cries of anger soon reached the ears of the children. "Come, sister, we must hurry," said the boy as he scurried through the woods. "We'll never outrun them this way," replied the girl. "Then we must seek faster forms," said the boy. "But they'll see us. Speed is more important than stealth right now." Their ferret bodies then changed and transformed into small, cat-like creatures, which allowed them to move much quicker through the woods than before. Their hearts soon began to pound frantically as they heard the sound of nearly a dozen wolves, in hot pursuit, closing in on them from behind. "Just a bit further and we'll," said the boy. Suddenly two wolves appeared in front of them from a line of bushes and blocked their paths. The two children skid to a stop and looked around the area anxiously. It wasn't long before the young boy spotted a possible escape route. "Quickly, this way," he said. He and his sister then turned and raced away down a nearby trail. But it wasn't long before their path was again blocked by yet more wolves. The girl screamed in fear at this as they turned and scampered through the trees in a desperate bid to escape the wolves. "Who are these people?" she screamed fearfully. "I don't know. I think they want to capture us." The two children continued to race quickly through the woods as they fought to escape their captors, but soon began to tire as the chase wore on. They eventually stopped to catch their breath and survey the situation. "We're close to Fenner Swamp," said the boy as he tried to catch his breath. "We can lose there." The girl only nodded, but said nothing. The two soon began running again, weaving their way in and out of the trees in a continued bid to shake their pursuers. But the wolves that pursued them were relentless. Finally, they reached the edge of the swamp and paused for a moment as the boy carefully picked out a path through the murky water in front of them, one that would best hide their trail. He then changed into a brown fox and began to step into the water. "Come on, we'll use this form to help us slip across the swamp. A fox's body is light enough that it won't sink into the ground, and yet fast and agile enough to stay ahead of our pursuers who should sink quickly into the muck," he said. The girl nodded, and then changed as well, transforming into a very cute, but distressed-looking red fox. The two then moved with great haste across the swamp, racing quickly as they did towards the far end of it in hopes of finally ditching their pursuers. But, just when they thought they'd escaped, 24 massive, black wolves appeared out of the shadows and quickly surrounded them. The largest of these wolves then smiled sadistically at the two children as he licked his lips in delight. "Looks like we finally caught us a royal treasure. Your father, the King of Jest, has been a bad man lately. He refuses to ally himself with the Emperor of Westfold, and become his vassal state. Today, that's going to change. When we deliver the two of you into our master's hands, your father will finally be forced to comply with our king's noble demands, growled the wolf. I thought we were going to hold them for ransom, said another of the wolves. The senior wolf snapped angrily at him. Oh, shut your trap. We'll get our money, and the emperor will force the kingdom of Jest to become his newest vassal, he growled. Upon hearing this, the girl's expression changed from that of fear into one of blatant defiance. You wicked, greedy, evil man. You would use us for your own corrupt and personal profit, she barked. The head wolf stepped forward and began circling the two children slowly. Oh, it's for more than just profit, young princess. You see, the kingdom of Westfold is ruled by a ruthless, greedy, evil king who just happens to be a brilliant tactician. But he is also a fool. Once he has established a vast and well-endowed empire, my master, the Duke Superior, will snatch it away from his cold, dead fingers. And, when he becomes king, I will, in turn, become the new Duke Superior, and with it I shall have wealth and riches beyond the wildest imagination of mortal men. You vicious brute! How can you be so cruel and greedy? Screamed the girl. The wolf let out a low, evil, guttural chuckle. It's easy when you're born evil, he said darkly. Just then Edwin's ears perked up as a faint sound in the distance tickled at his ears. He soon turned his eyes to the sky in search of its source. What he saw next made his heart leap with hope. Ferret. Now, he whispered to his sister. For a moment she seemed to ignore him, before suddenly realizing what he had just said. She then instantly complied, and the two children rapidly changed again into their ferret forms. They then raced away in a mighty burst of speed, sailing past the lead wolf, and over to a nearby tree where they quickly scampering up it until they were safely in its topmost branches. Several of the nearby wolves then lunged at the tree with vicious force, throwing their bodies against it in hopes of shaking the two children out of its branches. But the two ferrets hung onto it for dear life. Be careful, you fools. I want them alive, shouted the head wolf. As the tree was shaking under them, the girl began to quietly sob. I'm scared, brother, she cried. Don't worry, help is coming, said Edwin. Where? Said the little girl. Just then the sound of thunderous wing beats echoed in the air. They then looked up, just in time, to see two great falcons, and a gigantic eagle, swooping down on them from above. The two falcons flew in and carefully snatched the children out of the tree, and into the air as the eagle flew close behind them. The head wolf soon heard the cry of the eagle, and looked up just in time to see the children being carried away. No! 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 He shouted. But before he could utter another word, a gigantic, muscular bear crashed through the trees and into the forest below, crushing one of the wolves under its massive feet as it did. It then turned and attacked another wolf, nearly slicing it in half with only but a single swipe of its great and mighty claws. The head wolf then turned in horror to see the great bear staring angrily at him. We end this now, Vorner. Your bid for power dies here, growled the bear. The wolf laughed maliciously. You will have to catch me first, he said snidely. The bear grinned slyly. I won't have to, he said, a hint of cold satisfaction in his voice. Just then 24 massive falcons, 36 gray bears, 14 lions, and a number of other gigantic predators stepped out of the growing darkness of the forest and quickly surrounded the large pack of wolves. The lead wolf then gazed deeper into the woods beyond them and saw an even larger group of all too familiar shadows moving back and forth between the trees. Moments later his ears filled with the agonized cries of his other men as they were slaughtered, one, by those same shadows until only he, and his handful of nearby men, remained. Just then, an icy cold, bone-chilling fear ran down his spine as reality began to sink in. He then turned his eyes back to the massive brown bear that stood in front of him and growled angrily in his face. By order of the King of Jest, you, Vorner, are to be slain on sight, said the bear. The wolf shivered slightly, and then quickly steeled himself as he tried to regain his composure. If he didn't, he'd die right here for sure. You would not dare touch a servant of the Duke Superior, he said with a condescending grin, his tail tucked firmly between his legs. The bear grinned magnanimously, and laughed mockingly. "Servant or not, by orders of my king, you will die here tonight, either by my hand, or that of my men," he growled gleefully. The wolf glared at him, his teeth bared viciously. "If you touch me, the king of Westfold will declare war against your kingdom and rip down its mighty walls until nothing remains of them except rubble and dust," he said defiantly. But, to his surprise, the bear laughed darkly. "Do you really believe that your words scare me? The king of Westfold knows of your treason. It is he who has given my king permission to slay you this day. And, with your death, your efforts, and that of your Duke Superior, to control the enchanted basin, ends here tonight," said the bear. The wolf's body soon went weak as the full gravity of his situation fell upon him. He knew that the man behind the bear, who presently stood before him, was not only trustworthy, but also unquestionably honest. Therefore, if he said that the king of Westfold knew of his treason, then the wolf knew it to be true. It also meant that his master, the Duke Superior, was already dead. Or, if not, he soon would be. So, even if he somehow survived this battle, his life was worth nothing anymore, as he would be hunted to the ends of the world until he was dead. He then sighed in surrender, sat down on the ground, and lowered his head as the bear cocked its arm back for the fatal blow. Consigned to his doom, he said nothing, nor made any sound as the claws and massive hand of the bear tore through his body like tissue paper. The two children of the king of Westfold squirmed awkwardly in the grasp of their rescuers as they tried to situate themselves in a way that would bring rest to their tired bodies. Then, just when they'd given up all hope of having any kind of a comfortable ride back to the castle, a great eagle sailed up underneath them. With a loving smile, he said, "Climb on my back, children." The two falcons that held the children soon set them down gently, one at a time, onto the back of the eagle, and then pulled away. As the two children clung tightly to the eagle's back, they quickly realized who he was. "Mardiver," they shouted in unison. He chuckled. "Yes, children, it's me. I'm glad to see that you are all right. We have worried about you all day. And, after much fruitless searching, when we heard about the hunters that were trying to capture you, we came immediately. And it looks like we weren't a moment too soon either," he replied with a joyful chuckle. "We're sorry we snuck out of the castle and worried all of you. It's just that we couldn't stand another day cooped up in that place, forced to take endless lessons on how to be proper royalty. We're still children. We needed our freedom for just one day," said the boy sadly. The eagle chuckled. "I understand completely, young ones. But you will have to discuss that with your father when we return. And, despite what you've done, I know he will be very happy to see you." "As will we," said the boy. "Do you think he'll punish us?" asked the girl. The eagle shook his head. "I cannot say. But, given the bravery and quick thinking that you showed today, I am certain that it will count with him for something. As chief of the palace guard, I may not have much say in matters of the royal family, but I am sure the king will, at the very least, listen to the advice of an old friend. It's possible that I may even successfully persuade him to be lenient with you," he replied. The two children smiled and nuzzled the great eagle. "Thank you, Mardiver. You're the best." The eagle smiled. "You are most welcome. Now, hold on. I can see the castle on the horizon. Therefore, we shall soon be home, and on the ground again, within mere moments. But not before we have a little fun." The two children then giggled as they grabbed on tightly to the eagle as he banked to the left and made a rolling dive to the forest below before pulling out just feet above the treetops as they sailed, with breathtaking speed, over the green canopy of the forest. And the children loved every moment of it. The end.